All right. It is 1:05 on the dot. I think we can go ahead and get started. And by the way, team members of mine, if I encounter some sort of technical difficulty or if you have issues understanding me or something's just not working, please feel free to unmute and let me know. Let's go ahead and get started. If I can get my mouse to work. There we go. So what I will do now is do a quick introduction of our presenters. I'll start with myself. So hello panelists, or excuse me, attendees to this demonstration of the DWRS cost reporting system. My name is Dylan Adams. I am a member of the program integrity team that oversees cost reporting. I go by he, him, his pronouns. And for those who might be a little hard of seeing, I am a white appearing man with blonde hair, blue eyes. And let's continue with introductions. Matt, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt. I am a fellow member of the cost reporting team here at DHS. I use he, him pronouns, and I too am a Caucasian male with blonde hair, blue eyes.
Christina, can you introduce yourself? Christina, you might be on mute.
I am on mute. Thanks, Dylan. I'm Christina Hansa. My data analyst for the program integrity team. She, her pronouns. I am Caucasian with brown eyes.
Also on our call are Anna and Megan, who are kind of helping behind the scenes, both to respond to questions and to make sure that this presentation runs smoothly. I think that kind of concludes our team. So let's dive on into the presentation itself. All right. Let's start off with some announcements. Well, first, this is their agenda. We're going to go through some announcements. I'm going to have this presentation that you'll see here that will go over the why and what of cost reporting. I'll also go over where you can get help and answers to any questions you might have. And then finally, we'll wrap this up with a probably a little bit under an hour for a demonstration of the cost reporting system itself. So start out with some announcements. As you all may have seen from a recent email that went out, submissions for cost reporting are due August 31st. That's at the end of this month. So we have about a month until everything is due. I'll go into overall timelines later on in this presentation. Other announcements that I'd like to make, I believe that you all attending this are on mute and can't speak. And that's just so that we can get through the presentation. We still want your questions very much so. So please, as we go through the presentations, put any questions you have in the Q&A function. We'll answer them as quickly as possible. And at the end of our demo, we'll try to answer them all together verbally as well, especially those that kind of have similar themes if there's something that we need to kind of circle back to and explain more. Other kinds of announcements, because the cost reports are due at the end of the month, we recommend that you get started as soon as possible. Please make sure to log in. Your authorized agents should have received login credentials and information about how to get started with the cost report. Please circle back with your authorized agent. And then we are a very transparent team. We love your feedback. We know that cost reporting is probably not many people's idea of fun. So anything that we can do to make this process smoother, please let us know. We've made drastic changes to the whole program since we've started. And then last but not least, I'll go over our email address and how to contact us a little bit more in depth, but just give us a couple days to respond if you have questions. We're normally pretty good getting back same day, but sometimes we get a big deluge of questions. So I'm here to explain the kind of background of cost reporting. So what you're looking at now, or why cost reporting now, pardon me. DWRS cost reporting is required by state statute. This went into law a couple years back. We had a few years of building out the system itself when we had intended to launch in 2020. Famously, 2020 was a hard year with the pandemic. So we ended up postponing the implementation of DWRS cost reporting back. This is now year 3, the third year of cost reporting, and the third year of a 5-year reporting cycle that I'll talk about a little bit more in depth in a bit. But why was cost reporting required in the first place? Well, on your screen, you should be able to see on the left-hand side of it a screenshot of one of our frameworks, one of our rate frameworks. And in it, there are certain assumptions that are circled in red, namely the supervision percentage and the percentage of the rate that's meant to account for benefits for direct care staff. Those assumptions were based on a study that DHS did a few years ago, and the whole idea of cost reporting is to kind of inform those assumptions that we have and have been using. So what is cost reporting exactly? Cost reporting is kind of literally what it sounds like. It's the reporting of your actual costs for your businesses that are required in order to provide services to people with disabilities, that the specific services of which that fall under the DWRS umbrella. So we are trying to collect all the costs that your businesses might have with the intention of informing our rates. We, in particular, do not do anything with rates. That's all handled by the legislature, and I'll go into that a little bit more in depth. But we are essentially trying to capture all this data to make sure that our rates pay for services and ensure accessibility, and that we're not, paying for things that aren't needed. Cost reporting is not an effort to look at your particular business and what you are doing. Roughly about 600 providers will be reporting this year. And like I said before, DHS does not change anyone's rate. We simply collect this data and use it to generate kind of aggregated reports. So we take everybody's data, we don't single anybody out. We take that information and provide the legislature with our findings. So again, no rate changes automatically occur, and there's no intention to have that be the case. This is not an audit of your business or your home. There is an there's an auditing component to cost reporting, but that auditing is more to if you are selected to explain how you filled out your cost report and came to came to conclusions about how you allocated certain costs. It's not really an audit of your actual business. And what will be reported exactly? So we collect data at the provider level, and as I mentioned before, we look for the actual cost of providing those services. These roughly fall into some categories that we have already kind of built pages around. For example, administrative and direct care staff wages, benefits, all that information. Excuse me. We also try to track your facility costs, transportation, any kind of client and programming supports, and then also general administrative costs as well. We have a pretty robust portal that providers will be using to report their costs. And we have ample fields where you can report things that we maybe haven't considered before. And as part of that, we just encourage you to let us know about what these costs are. And then finally, we are only requesting your DWRS costs. If you, for example, want to put in all of your costs that are associated with providing all of your services, if you do both DWRS and, let's say another service like things under the elderly waiver, you would only be required to report your DWRS costs. But if it works for your accounting best to report everything, you can do that. We just ask you to kind of show the percentage of like those costs that actually go to DWRS. We ask that you use official documentation as much as possible. We recommend using your regular bookkeeping records as part of this. So if you have TurboTax or what's another good basic accounting software, anything like that that you use to kind of track your overall payroll and your invoices. If you do not keep track of your costs currently, we first recommend that you do. It's, I think, technically required under Medicaid. But if you are not, we have a number of resources that are available to kind of help you track those certain costs. We do recommend that you use things like your credit card or bank statements. We also have resources on the DWRS cost reporting website to kind of help you perhaps do time studies if you don't have a sense of how much time your workers dedicate to a specific service versus other tasks. So we have a number of resources available, but again, we would like for everybody to use as much as possible regular official bookkeeping documentation to guide them in cost reporting. And again, our software is pretty robust. It's pretty expansive in terms of what kinds of things we collect. We do try to make it very simple and understandable, and we try to split out certain things but really only if needed. So for example, in the screenshot you see on your screen on the right-hand side is a split out of employee benefits that you might provide. So in that particular case, we don't really just want all of your benefits costs. We want you to split them out into some of the examples that you see in front of you: health insurance, disability insurance, retirement, etc. And then with that, and we can kind of go in this during the demo itself, if it makes the most sense to kind of combine certain people or costs into one line, we recommend you go for that. Just make sure that you are following kind of the instructions that are being given to you. All right, so all providers will need to report eventually, all DWRS providers. We have 5-year cycles in which folks will report. So as I mentioned before, this is year 3 of the first cycle. Each sample is about 600 providers because we have about 3,000 providers of DWRS services in Minnesota. For the most part, we want you to give us a year's worth of data on your costs. But typically what that is simply the most, the most recently available calendar year for most providers. If you have a fiscal year that is not a calendar year, that's totally okay to use for your cost report. We just ask that it be within 18 months of the day you report. As in the end of your fiscal years within 18 months. There's an example over there, but just make sure the math is correct. If you have any questions about using that fiscal year, also feel free to email us. But I think for probably 95% of providers, they'll just give us the most recently available calendar year. If a provider fails to report by the deadline, which again is August 31st, DHS is required to initiate a stop payment process. Now, if you do not submit your cost reports on August 31st, that does not mean that we'll cut off your payments right away. There are a series of warnings that come out automatically if you have not submitted your cost report each month until December 1st. After December 1st, we are required by state statute to stop payments to providers who do not report their costs. So that is something to be very aware of as the kind of overseers of businesses like yourselves. Yeah. And as promised, here is kind of our annual reporting schedule. So in March of this year, we notified all providers that all the providers of the sample who would be reporting. We gave a 90-day notice of the reporting deadline, which again is August 31st. And then each month after that, if you do not submit your cost report, you'll receive a notice of noncompliance. And finally, we'll send a notification of stop payment for noncompliance in December. Is it your year to report? We actually get a fair number of people who are a little confused. They attend this presentation and they ask us if it's their year to report. For the most part, your authorized agents would have been contacted if you were supposed to report this year. You will have received a number of emails from us. If you haven't received those emails, chances are it's not your year to report. If you're still very unsure, please reach out to us via email and we can confirm. But for the most part, everyone should kind of know. So where to get help and answers? First and foremost, I did promise this email address for asking us questions, dhs.dwrs costreporting@state.mn.us. That is our email address. We have somebody check it every single business day. Again, for the most part, we are able to answer questions sent to that email address same day. Sometimes if we're getting a ton of people asking us questions, we will need about 3 business days to respond. We only have a handful of people. I think we technically have like about 4 people who work on DWRS cost reporting. So, we are doing our best to get through all of your questions and concerns. And when we get kind of bogged down with a lot, it may take us a while. And please don't send us multiple emails. If you're concerned about something, it's not going to get your response quicker. I'll show this in a moment here. We also have a really robust website. So we have a DWRS cost reporting website. I can never personally remember the URL, so I just Google it. And by Googling it, we're the top result. So type in DWRS cost reporting. We're the top result. In there, you can find all kinds of information, including the schedule that I just showed you, resources that can help you with everything from, like I said, time studies to statutory language about what we're doing, and all kinds of other information. Most importantly, though, is the DWRS cost reporting manual. There's a link to the manual in our DWRS cost reporting website. That manual has specific guidance to every single web page of the cost reporting portal. And the number one thing that has changed as we've gone through the cost reporting process has been the manual. And those manual changes have happened for the most part because of feedback from providers like yourselves. So anything that is confusing, we have done our best to really make efforts to clarify everything and make it as simple as possible. Because we're constantly doing updates to it, the manual, there isn't an option to download. And also that means like as you kind of are working through this, we recommend checking it every once in a while, just to make sure that you are up to speed on what's being covered in those. We'll show this in the demo specifically, but each page of the cost reporting web portal has a link that will go to the manual and the specific part of the manual that will cover that page. And then finally, there's some specific guidance on like kind of more complex issues like cost allocations and the difference between authorized agents and provider users, which we'll cover in a bit. Yeah. So give me one moment here while I get us ready for the demonstration itself. All right. Sorry about that. I will share my screen. And you should be able to see now my Firefox page. And as I mentioned at the beginning, all I have to do to kind of get the DWRS cost reporting website is to just Google it. Again, I can never quite remember what the exact URL is. It's pretty long, as you can see on the bottom of the screen. So I just Google DWRS cost reporting. It brings me to this site. If I were to click it, I get the full web page. And there's plenty of useful information in here. However, we're here for the demonstration mostly. So I am going to log in now as a authorized agent for a demonstration provider. What you see on the next screen, it should look pretty close to what you will actually see when you do your cost report. It might look slightly different, and I'll try to call those differences out as we get through them. So I'm logging in as an authorized agent, which again is whom DHS primarily contacts regarding cost reporting. Now, I will specify something that used to be the case, is no longer the case, and I hope it's not confusing, and I'll try to explain it a couple different ways. We used to have a situation in which the authorized agents had to create user accounts for other people to then fill out the information in the cost report. It was a kind of clunky system in which every provider would almost certainly have at least 2 logins that they would need. We've gotten plenty of negative feedback about it. People were not thrilled about it, and we this year have implemented a change in which authorized agents can now log in and do the entirety of the cost report themselves. Now, you smaller organizations are probably cheering, yay, that'll make my job easier. However, larger providers tend to have multiple users perhaps go into the system and add in certain portions. For those, we ask that when you log in as the authorized agent, that you will create contacts. And I'll show you that in just a moment. First and foremost, though, you're looking at our test environment, so it's going to look a little different between here and the environment that you will be using to submit your cost reports. But it's pretty similar. It's going to have some basic information about what the cost reporting system is. There is some information here on the differences between provider users and authorized agent accounts, as well as some helpful links along the side here to the manual and also like a workbook if you want to use that to guide your thoughts. But as I scroll down to the very bottom, I can see the actual providers that are linked to my particular login. This is 2023. I'm going to use my demo test provider 2023. In your logins, you should only see your specific provider businesses. If you don't, that's probably a good excuse to send us an email. So let's go ahead and dive into my demo account. And remember when I said that you might want to create user accounts for those in your organization to fill this out? Again, smaller providers may not need that, but for larger providers, that's definitely going to be the case. To do that, you would go in here and create that new contact. As you can see down here, I already have one, who's my colleague, Christina. For the sake of this example, I'm going to go in and create an account for Matt. That's my colleague who will do the next portion of this. Sorry, it does take a little bit to kind of do all of this. Soda. And there we are. As you can see, I've now created a contact for both Matt and Christina. In the real world, what would happen once I create those contact records, it just sends out an automatic email to the email address you included there with login information and a temporary password for your other users. They would then get themselves set up with an account. They'd be able to enter information into the cost report and see what has already been entered, but they would not have the ability to formally submit the report. The only people who have the ability to do that are the authorized agents, and I will call that out again towards the end of the demo. All right, now I've scrolled down to the bottom of this contacts page, and once I've gotten done entering my contacts, I will hit save and next. And here I will enter some basic information about my company itself. Apologies, because of the screen that I am working with, some of this information is in a little scrunched. This information will not be scrunched on your, when you actually log in. It's just kind of a problem with our demonstration system. So up top here, we have our business name. This number right here, that's all those sixes. It's a little cut off up top here, but it says like your federal employer identification number, your FEIN. I have already entered some of this information. So I've put in 10 annual unique recipients. There's the number of unique individuals my demonstration provider has served in a given year. We've been in operation for about 10 years, for example. We are the government, which makes sense. I finally put in the timeline for what my cost report is covering. And again, for most providers, I would say realistically, almost 95% will use the most recently available calendar year. So that'd be 2022. And then finally, over here, we have the ability to add, we request all of your NPIs that are associated with your business. For most providers, this will be like 1, maybe 2. But for some providers that are particularly big, I think the largest number of NPIs associated with one provider in Minnesota is something like 130, maybe 120. So we included that number of NPIs. So it's a lot, but we try to make this as easy as possible to include all that information. And now I'm going to hit save and next. And I'm actually going to pass the baton off to my colleague, Matt, who's going to go over the revenues and wages pages while I rest my vocal cords. So Matt, go ahead and take over.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Dylan. I'm going to share my screen here. Is everyone able to see my screen now? Let's see. We'll try this again. There we go. Can everyone see that okay?
Can't quite see it yet.
Let's see here. Sorry about that. Let's see, share. There we go. How about now? Is that working?
Still cannot see it.
Let's see. Sorry about that. There. How about now?
Now we can see it.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Dylan. Again, Dylan demoed how to complete the contact information and the provider information page. So now we're going to be going over 3 pages together, starting with the revenues page, as you can see here. So first, again, I want to outline how there is this navigate button right here. So it gives you an easy way to scroll between different pages when you're completing your cost report. So again, revenues page, this is a mandatory page. So all providers included in the cost reporting system, have billed DHS or are billing DHS for the delivery of some service. So whether that's a day service, a unit-based service, residential service, that sort of thing. So this, again, is a mandatory page. And just for the sake of the demo, I did include a couple of service lines down here, but I will show how to add another revenue line just for you in the presentation here so you can see how that's done. So there is a note here that says we do not want to know about non-service revenues. So, if you're a residential provider, collecting Social Security or, housing support or GRH, we don't want to know those. We only want to know about your incomes related to the delivery of DWRS services specifically. So this is something that you providers can get from your minutes page. If you're not certain where that is, you can, again, get this information directly from your minutes page. So again, I do have a couple of services listed down here, but we'll go ahead and add, we'll just say a residential service. And then depending on the type of service you select here, the service code options will differ. So again, residential services over here, you'll see that you'll have options for family residential, community residential, family foster care, that sort of thing. So we'll say that if you're doing unit-based services, the service codes, again, will change. So again, we'll add a residential line. And we'll just say that we're doing a community residential services adult. And then we're going to get into the annual service revenue here. So the important thing to note, you'll see how there are these little question marks here under annual service revenue and annual recipients. There, if you hover over it, it'll say, it will provide you an explanation of what we're looking for. So annual service revenue means the sum total of money a provider received for a service and not a rate. So that's really something important to know, that we're not looking for your daily rate here. We want to know how much you billed for the entire year. So you'll see too that there's a link to the instruction manual. So if I click on that, that will take you to the exact page, the revenues page within the cost reporting manual. So if you scroll down, you'll see annual revenues right here, and then it will provide an example. And then it'll show you that, this is the revenues that the organization earned during the reporting period. So again, if you're using a full year as your reporting period, you want to include the entire revenue for that year. So we'll just say that the annual service revenue for this residential is community residential service for the entire year is $250,000. And then annual units. So this is going to be the total number of units that you build, that your agency billed for the entire year. So again, this might not align with what, this might not be realistic depending on, your specific agency. We'll just say for the sake of this demonstration that we have 1,000 annual units. And then annual recipients over here. So again, this is the total number of unique individuals who receive services. So these are non-duplicated people. So keep in mind that, depending on your agency, some people may receive a couple of different services. So we don't want to count, if it's the same person, we don't want to count them for both receiving respite services and we'll say residential services. We just want to count someone one time. So we will say 5 annual recipients here. And then we'll create the new revenue, at which point in time you'll see it populate down here. Okay, so then once this line shows up, there's going to be an edit, view, or delete button. So again, once you have these, all of these revenues lines added here, it will populate, all the totals will populate here at the bottom. So again, just for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to delete this residential services line and just stick with the day services. But keep in mind, if you're a larger provider, you may have multiple different service lines. So you can see this items per page. You can select how many different items or how many different service lines you want to show up at one time. So again, once you create your revenue line, it will populate down here. Everything adds up for you. If for any reason you need to edit, make a change, you can either delete the entire line and add it again, or you can just come in here and click the edit button. So one thing to note too, excuse me, is that depending on the service type you select here, that will dictate some of the later screens that show up in your cost report. So I'll bring this up again later too, but as we just have day services as our service lines, that will come up later when we're talking about cost allocations and that sort of thing. So I will note too, if we click back to this cost reporting manual, if you are, for example, a family provider, we do have a guide specifically for family providers, which has been pretty helpful. It has screenshots, instructions for logging in, creating the contact section. So we understand that the reporting process can be a little bit trickier if you're a family provider or a smaller provider. So just keep in mind that the instruction manual has specific instructions for those family providers. So once all service lines are totaled and entered, we're going to click Save and Next. And that brings us to our administrative and program support salaries, benefits, and allocations. So this page is specifically for the admin staff and not your direct care or your direct support staff. Okay, this is for the people kind of behind the scenes who are, running the business, kind of your office staff, that sort of thing. So again, just for the sake of this demo, I have included 2 lines already. One is a line for employees and one is a line for contractors. So at the top of this page, there is this question: do you have any administrative and program support salaries and wages to report for employees and or contractors? So you will see that there's an option for yes or no here. Okay. So again, if you're a smaller agency, a smaller provider, you may not have admin staff, and you might be doing a lot of that yourself. As maybe the CEO, you are doing a lot of direct care, that sort of thing. So you have the option, again, as a smaller provider, to select no here. But again, just for the sake of this demo, we're going to enter one for both a contractor and an employee. So we'll start with a contractor, and we'll say that we have a custodian working. So that's the working job title. And then under position type, we have a few different options here. We try to get everything, we try to include all different position types in this. But if for whatever reason you don't see one that aligns with a specific contractor type or employee type, you can always select all other here at the bottom. But for the sake of this, for the sake of this, we're going to select housekeeping janitorial. And then we'll say that we have one custodian working. And then the total salaries and wages we'll say is $25,000. So once we have all that information entered, we're going to create, and then that will populate down here. Again, just for the sake of this demo, I did create one of these ahead of time. So I'm going to just delete this new one that showed up, and I'll go into the allocations and then, what the edit and view buttons mean. So again, for the custodian here, housekeeping janitorial, we're going to go to click this allocation button here. And that's where you, as a cost report preparer, can come in and allocate the time that custodian spends performing different job functions. So for example, we'll just say that your custodian, for whatever reason, maybe spends 90% of their time performing services for the kind of ongoing support of that DWRS or for your agency. And then we'll just say, for the sake of this cost report, that they spend 10% of their time actually doing direct care support. Again, this is just an example for the sake of this cost report. So we're going to allocate 90% of their time to the DWRS service, and then 10% of their time to the DWRS day services. So again, that would be your direct support. And the next page is actually going to be the direct support page too, so we can cover this more then. So once you have your allocations in, whatever they may be, if you have 50-50 or 90-10 in this example, we're going to scroll down and then save and close. And then that's going to populate here. So we see that the custodian has 90% of their time spent on DWRS service administration, and then 10% of their time is spent doing direct care. So again, we understand that allocations can be difficult for different agencies to kind of figure out. So however you do that as an agency, we do have the notes section here at the top that you can use. And then also down at the bottom, you can describe your methodologies for allocating costs, whether it's, as Dylan mentioned earlier, conducting a time study, maybe your accounting software automatically calculates where your employees spend your time. So please feel free to, put various information in here or up here in the notes section. So one thing I will note, the difference you'll see down here between employees and contractors is that employees have the option for benefits and payroll. So this will be covered in the next page too when we get into direct care staff. But for the sake of this demonstration, we're going to click on that. And I input some numbers here already for the employees. Again, just due to business structures, your contractors may not have access to the same benefits and payroll that your full-time employees do, which is why that is not an option down here for the contractors. So again, we'll go into benefits and payroll. We had $3,000 say for the CFO for health insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance, all these other benefits, retirement benefits, Social Security and Medicare. We have seen in the past that this section has been skipped. So just, be sure to cover the Social Security and Medicare. Again, these may not be realistic numbers, but just for the sake of this, we will put some things in. We will save and close, and then you will see that the total benefits and payroll populates right there. So when you scroll to the bottom, again, everything is automatically populated for you. The total salaries for your employees, which again is the CFO. The total salaries and wages for your contractor, again, which is the custodian. And then the total benefits, again, and everything is down there. So again, please feel free to use the notes section or this section down here to describe your methodologies and what tips you use. To make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay. So once you have all of your service lines and admin lines, salaries, benefits entered, we can click Save and Next. And then that brings us to the direct care staff and supervisor wages, benefits, and allocations. So one thing to note right off the bat is you will see on this page, there is not the yes, no question as was on the previous one. So if you remember, there's a yes, no. Do you have any administrative or program support? Yes or no. Again, smaller agencies may not. But on the direct care, there is no option for that. And that's because the direct care staff your agency has, that's the way your agency is able to bill DHS for your DWRS services. You know, you have to have direct care staff. So that's the reason why there is no option for the yes, no here. So select staff type. Again, I've already pre-populated one down here, a day support staff, direct care worker. But again, just for the sake of this demo, I want to show it again. So we're going to select employee. The work job title will be day support staff. And then if this employee has a customized pay for working with deaf and or hard of hearing individuals, there's an option for yes or no. For this example, we're going to select no. Position type. So again, the three options will show up here: direct care supervisor, direct care worker, and then licensed direct care worker. So for the licensed direct care worker, what we're looking for, you know, this is primarily likely going to be an RN, an LPN, that sort of thing. And we're not looking for licensed as in, you know, licensed to provide DWRS or HCBS services. We're looking, this is more so for nursing workers there. So for our day support staff, we are going to select direct care worker. And then here's where we're going to go in and put the wages. So we're going to put annual wages for this direct care, we'll say $35,000. And we will say 2,040 hours. Overtime pay, we will say $3,000 for, we'll say 100 hours. And then, you know, you can enter anything here too. So for holiday pay, vacation time, sick, PTO, that sort of thing. But again, for the sake of this demo, we'll just use $1,200 PTO for 80 hours. And again, these may not be realistic numbers, but then you can include bonuses, on-call training, other pay, that sort of thing. So another important thing to note is that this is gross pay. So this is pre-tax payment, pay that your employees receive. We don't want to know post-tax. We want to know what they're making before any of that is, any of those taxes, benefits are taken out. So once everything is in here, you'll see that it pre-populates the total wages. So we're going to create the direct care wage. So I have that one down here. This is the one I just created. Actually, excuse me, the bottom one is the one that I just created. We'll delete this top one. Okay. And then just similar to the previous page, you'll see this benefits and payroll. So same thing that we did with the CFO on the previous page. We came in and entered health insurance, dental insurance, vision, all of these different benefits will be included in here. Retirement, Social Security. Again, we want to be sure to include that. So we'll just say $1,000 for that. All of these will be in there too. We'll say 500 for that, and then save and close. And again, it's going to repopulate at the bottom. Next, we're going to get into the allocations here. So again, similar to the CFO on the previous page, we want to get into your allocations. So this again is for your day support staff. So on the first page, the revenues page, I mentioned that depending on which service type you select, that would dictate some of the options that show up later in the report. So as we selected day services as our revenue stream, day services is going to be our options here for allocations. So our day support staff person that we created, we'll say that they spend 90% of their time used during doing direct care for the service recipients, for the people that your agency supports. Okay, and again, however you determine this allocation, whether it's through the time study or whether you have accounting software, however you determine it, we just want to see how much of their time is spent directly on day support. So we'll do 90% there. And then if there's RN staff, LPN staff, we want to know those too. But again, for the sake of this one, we'll say they're not going to do any of these. This specific made up staff person will not. But you'll see here that I put 10% under DWRS service administration. So again, this could be, maybe doing paperwork or things, things in the background that isn't specifically direct care for that service recipient. So we have 10% here. We will save and close. And you'll see that it again automatically populates. So the total wages, total benefits, compensation, our various allocation percentages, however those are broken down. Again, you have to be sure that it adds up to 100%. And then again, everything is going to be calculated at the bottom. So again, the methodologies, we highly recommend, if possible and whatever, we'd like to see notes too. So if you want to add something in as a provider, just saying, hey, this is how we calculated this, or please feel free to use the notes or this methodologies down here. So I just want to make sure I haven't missed anything. I believe that should be it for all of the revenues pages and the direct care and admin wages pages. So I'm going to toss it off to my colleague, Christina, who is going to be continuing with the other benefits portion.
Thanks, Matt. All right, I am going to share my screen. All right, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right. All right, so Matt kind of went and talked through the navigation. So he talked about revenues, administrative program support wages, direct care, and supervisor wages. I'm now going to talk about the rest. So we have other benefits. Once you get to the other benefits page, this is different costs that are offered that don't tie directly to the individual employees. So if you do offer any other benefit costs, you click yes. Here we talk about your program services type, the total cost amount, say $100, and I put 100% for all other administration. For a total allocation of 100%. And then down in the nature of other employee benefit costs, I said for newspapers. For describing a methodology for it, wasn't for newspapers. Next is client program and support costs. So this section does cost report. It collects information about costs and allocations that are related to programming and supports for people who receive the services. So if you have any client program and support costs, you will click yes. Excuse me. For the program services types, there's a decent long list, but there's the client and program support amount. So for this example, supplies and equipment, you would put the amount, which we said 1,000, and then where it's allocated, so 90% for day services and then 10% for all other services to get 100% allocation. There's others that are cost to access to community services, participation costs, reinforcers, mileage reimbursement for in-program transportation, other client program support costs, and then at the bottom it adds your total. And then you describe your methodology for allocating costs. So for example, at the top when I said supplies and equipment, for this demonstration, a desk and a chair. And then for describing the nature of other client supports costs, if you do not have anything here, you can just type NA. Then we will save and next. Next is day program facility costs. And this page will only appear if one enters day services on the revenue page. So when Matt was talking about revenue pages, when you enter about day program services, then this page will pop up. So then it'll ask if you lease or own your day service facility. In here, you'll put your street address, the city, the zip, the county, whether do you own or lease, and your square footage. I have an example here, so we'll edit and view. So we said the DHS building that's downtown St. Paul. So the address, the city, example, lease, the square footage, 1,000. And then for facility costs, it's mortgage, lease, or rent. For example, we put 24,000. Utilities, property taxes, if there's any other facility costs. And then your total facility costs would be at the bottom. And you would do this for all of the day program buildings and or facilities that you have. And then for methodology, for allocating the cost to each cost pool, for this example, I said day services and administrative. Next, we'll talk about transportation costs. So this cost report is collected for DWRS non-wage costs that are related to travel and transportation. So if you have any transportation costs, you would click yes. Excuse me. Here you'd put the vehicle of the cost, so financing it, leasing it, if you're renting it, the amount would be like $4,000, and then where it's allocated. So for this example, we said day services for 100% allocation. You could also do example for vehicle insurance, put $200, and also we would put 100% that is allocated to DWRS day services. And once you have entered that, it will automatically appear at the end. And here it goes through with your vehicle license and registration, fuel, the vehicle repair and maintenance, and at the bottom there will be a total. There's also another category for other transportation costs. So this is mileage reimbursement, public transportation costs. So example, we said 500 and 100% for day services. There's also other vehicle costs. And then at the bottom, this will have a total for this section. Describing your methodology for allocating costs to each cost pool. Example we put as bus pass and car lease. And describing what is included in the other vehicles related costs. If you do not enter anything in here, you can put NA. And while going through these pages, I know that Matt and Dylan both have talked about it. You can click on this cost report instructions manual. It'll bring you to the page that you are discussing. So vehicle costs and usage, this page will bring it to the vehicle costs and usage. So this is specifically for the vehicle itself. So we'll ask if you lease or own a vehicle. If yes, we'll ask for the year, make, and model, whether it's lifted, date of disposal, date of acquisition, the cost of the modifications, and then the primary county and total mileage driven during year. So we have an example down here. So we said a 2014 Chevy Malibu, the date of acquisition, date of disposal if applicable. Whether it's lifted, so we said no. Estimated cost of modifications, there wasn't any. And then we said primary county was Ramsey with total mileage of 20,000. Well, we'll talk about the vehicle allocation. So average number of single passenger trips per day. 1. The average number of passengers in a shared trip. For example, we said 3. And here you're going to do the percentage for each of these to equal 100%. So percent of miles driven with one passenger, we said 10%. For miles driven with multiple passengers, 80%, and then driven without any passengers, 5%, and driven for all other services and usage, we said 5%, for a total of 100%. And you will do this for all vehicles that you have specific for DWRS services. You click Save and Next. Next is the general and administrative costs. So you're going to enter costs that are not reported for any day program facilities. So example would be a mortgage and lease for another program facility that is used. So we said $30,000, 100% for day service administration for an allocation of 100. And it goes through, like, there's utilities, contracted services, if there's any building repair, maintenances, other facility costs, and then you continue down to all other administrative expenses. Examples are, if there's any attorney fees, here we've set accounting and auditing fees, other professional service fees, any licensing fees, bank charges, interest expense, continuing training and education for non-wage costs. There's any recruitment expenses, office supplies. The list is very long. So when you scroll down, then we have program, general, and administrative expenses. Examples would be like the software, technology, if there's any telecommunications. For this example, we said for software, $500 and 50% for both to get 100% allocation. And at the very bottom, when you scroll down, you'll have a total of all the costs added up. For describing your methodology for allocating costs to each pool, you just describe like what was for. So for the software example, we said software updates, lease for another facility, and then accounting fees. Describing the costs reported at other costs. You can put NA. Next, we're going to do the direct care workers questionnaire. So this is going to ask for staffing of how many employees who provide DWRS direct services to individuals does your agency employ. So this you'd put how many full-time and how many part-time. Here we'll ask about holiday pay. So if your company offers holiday pay, yes or no. If you click yes, it'll ask if so, are direct care workers eligible for holiday pay? You'd either say yes or no. So if you say yes, it'll go down to what's the waiting period before newly hired direct care workers are eligible for the holiday pay. We have no waiting period, 1 to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 11, and 12 plus months. Example, we put 1 to 2, excuse me, minimum number of hours per week that a direct care worker must work to be eligible for it. We would put 32, we could put 35 for this example. Of the direct care workers who are employed by your agency, what percent are currently eligible for holiday pay? So here we could put 80% are eligible. And then the average annual number of holiday days, which are not hours, received by eligible direct care workers. You put 5. And this continues to ask the same question for paid time off, whether it's for full-time or part-time. And it'll ask the same questions, whether if they're eligible to receive it, what's the waiting period, the minimum number of hours to be eligible. Of the direct care workers employed by your agency, what percentage are currently eligible for it? And then the average annual number of PTO days that received by eligible direct care workers. So we continue down and we talk about the same question inside of for health insurance. And then there's other benefits. And it's, does your company offer any other benefits? And if so, do they contribute to any of the benefits? And you put yes or no. If you put yes, they'll ask what the waiting period is. So example, no waiting period, minimum number of hours per week that a direct care worker must work to be eligible. Of the direct care workers employed by your agency, what percent is currently eligible for these benefits? 100% is our example. And then percent of direct care workers currently receiving these, we said 100%. And then it says, it doesn't look like there's a box here, but there are boxes here. It says, please specify other benefits you offer. Example would be dentist for both. The last section is training, continuing education, and tuition reimbursement. So this is how many hours of non-mandated training do first-year direct care workers receive? Example, we said 10. How many of non-mandated training on average do direct care workers receive after their first year of employment? For full-time and part-time, we said 5. Does your agency contribute toward the non-wage costs of attending non-mandatory training to improve the skills? Providing DWRS services? Yes, no. Does your organization provide tuition reimbursement to direct care workers? It's either you can do yes or no. If you click yes, it will drop down to asking if your organization provides tuition reimbursement to direct care workers, and then what is the maximum annual reimbursement limit. And if you offer tuition reimbursement, what percentage of individuals that provide the DWRS services currently receive tuition reimbursement? So once you are done with that, you're going to click Save and Next. Which will bring us to our cost report summary, and I'm going to hand it off to Dylan, who's going to talk about the cost report summary.
Thank you, Christina. I am going to round us out for the end of this presentation. One moment here while I share my screen. Okay, you should now be able to see my screen with login information for this environment. I am again logging in. Oh my gosh, please don't do that to me right now. And I think I may have logged on as the wrong thing. Okay, 1 second while I try this again. It's asking me to reset my password. Shoot. Okay. Give me another moment to try this again. Oh, for gosh sake. Sorry, everyone. I would recommend that maybe you don't try to mess with your passwords and have multiple logins like I always do. Okay, well, let me log in then as a different user and I'll explain. You know what, that's why I am sorry, everyone. I don't think I went into the test environment. That might be it. Okay, apologies. All right, I am back in. I am going to navigate now to the direct care. Oops, meant to go further down, the cost report summary. So you're now looking at the cost report summary page. And on this page, what's going to happen is It doesn't automatically do this, so you do actually have to have it calculate. When I hit that calculate button, what it's going to do is the system is going to go ahead and summarize everything that you've entered into it up to this point. And it does take a moment, so don't worry about it. If it seems a little slow, it's just the way it is. Theoretically, it should be faster than this. And what it then does is summarizes all of your costs for you and then takes into account those allocations as well. So, and again, some of my numbers might be a little different than just what Matt and Christina have entered so far in the system, and that's okay. We've used some different numbers in this demonstration. If you do notice any differences in numbers that get calculated here compared to what your own internal notes say, please send us an email. We can help you investigate. But it should calculate everything just fine. For example, here, if we were to have direct care staff, and I said that I had paid them $39,000 and I allocated something like 90% to direct care work, that ends up coming across as $35,000. And the rest of the money is allocated over here, which I had said previously was service administration. So essentially what you're looking at is exactly like the title says, it's just a summary of what you've already entered. And it covers all the costs. The final thing to say about this page, other than you do have to click calculate to get it to work, is that if you are interested in printing a summary or having like a record of what you've entered, we recommend that you go into the site and print off your submission here. So after you're done entering everything and all of your numbers look good, go ahead and select print. I'm not going to right now because I don't think it's set up properly in the test environment, but it will absolutely work when you try to print it on your own. All right, so what I've now done after I'm done reviewing my work on the cost report summary page is I selected Save and Next, which then took me to the provider certification and attestation page. And what this is one big notice that says, hey, you're about to submit this cost report. Everything in here needs to be as accurate as possible. And by submitting this, you are agreeing that all the information you are providing is as accurate to your knowledge. You know, it's not like under penalty of perjury or whatever. It's not like that, but like you're certifying that your costs are as true as you believe they are. And what you would do is you would simply select that checkbox and then hit submit to formally end your cost report. I am not going to click submit right now just because I might have to do another demo later and I might need to keep this particular provider. So I'm going to keep it. But all I would have to do when I'm done is just simply click this button and that is it. And with that, we finished the demonstration portion. And so what I will now do is pivot to answering some of the many questions that you all have in the chat. And what my colleague Megan has done she's given some answers to some of these, and I will try to address them in order. So, Josh Howie asked, how do you determine where to count people? We have multiple services and just want to make sure we are doing it correctly. It would seem that some of the services would appear to have no one if they have already been counted in another service. So Josh, the easiest way to allocate the time of staff appropriately would be to have payroll tracking of how your staff are spending their time and what services that they may be providing. We typically suggest that organizations track which services are being done by their direct care staff throughout the year. This simplifies reporting and aligns with billing. It should also align with the requirements of EVV, electronic visit verification requirements. So that is what we recommend generally. If that does not make sense to you, we have resources on our page, our cost reporting website that includes like an example of how to do a time study, which is probably what we would recommend if you're not able to easily track your employees' time at the moment. All right, from there, I'm going to now answer Tracy Christensen's question. which is all of our management staff, including the executive director, work direct care shifts during the year. Do I include that portion of their wages as program or rather than admin? And I think by program, they meant direct care. So this is a complicated answer, but I'll explain. The guidance is that you report staff on the page where they work the majority, so 50% plus 1, 51-ish% of their time. So if your executive director spends 85% of their time, for example, on the administration of the organization, you'd want to put them on the admin page. If the remaining 15% of their time is providing direct care services, you can enter that as part of their allocations for day services when entering that line into the administration section. That would be the easiest way to do it. In both the admin and direct care pages, there is the option to allocate time across those buckets. That can also be captured. I'm going to now move on to Marita Bueller, their question. Are these allocations for each NPI/UMPI? So if you have 2 sites that a maintenance director attends to, would you say 50% allocation for each site? Allocations are not specific to a location or NPI. They are simply specific to the work being done. If you have a staff person who's doing direct care for day services but split between 2 sites, then they're only doing direct care services and no administration, you would say 100% of their time goes to day services, if that makes sense. Moving on to the next question from Ovi A. Do we do the direct care pay for all direct care workers individually, or do we do an average for all workers? So I would say you would report all payments and money provided to the staff for the year. You shouldn't be reporting averages or hourly wages or anything like that. And I can kind of show you real quick what that might look like. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I do want to show you like what you could do. So if I share my screen and I log in real quick. Okay, so if this is the direct care staff and supervisor wages section, and I'm creating maybe a line for multiple employees, that's perfectly doable. In fact, we would probably encourage it because it's probably easier for you to track your information. So if I have direct care staff, let's actually say day staff, and this is like a direct care worker. Let's say I have like 4 employees. And those 4 employees make about 35,000 a year. So 35 times 4, actually, for the sake of this example, let's do 25,000 because that will help me. So if I have 4 employees making each 25,000 per year, that would end up being $100,000 for all of them. And then what I would then do is just calculate their wages across all the hours for all those people. So if each person works about 2,040 hours in a year, I would just simply sum those up for all of them. So I think that would be 8,160, quick mental math there. So 8,000 day staff. And then I would do the same for all of these other lines. All right, and with that, I'll go on to the next question. Jennifer Freeberg asked, are the transportation sheets only for in-program transportation, or is it also for book and transportation? And I'm sorry if you can hear my cat meowing in the background. Arthur. That actually worked. So to answer this question, T2003-UC is not a DWRS service. So those costs no longer have to be reported. The only costs that should be reported here when it comes to transportation are in-program or service-related transportation costs. So for example, this might be a vehicle a family residential provider uses to bring their residents into the community to go shopping or to take them to an event, something like that. It could also include costs of a company car that's used for certain admin staff purposes, purposes related to your business. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question. Moving forward, I have a question from Ken Bentz. Some providers have owners/board members who are not involved with the day-to-day operations, but participate in vision and strategic decisions for which they receive compensation. Where should these costs and allocations be recorded? Board members or other part-time employees that fill administrative roles, like planning or decision-making, should probably be reported under the administrative page. Depending on the hours of committed time they have in a year, you can report them as a partial FTE, partial full-time employee. So if I were to go back into the system and show you all, just do that real quick. So if we're looking back in the system again, and I minimize all these windows. So in my admin staff section, if I were to, have a board member, if they receive any benefits at all, I'd put them as an employee. If you're giving them like what's it called? It's a W-2 if they're an employee, but I think it's a 1099 if they're not. That's how you kind of delineate between employee and contractor. Regardless, if you're coming up with board member, for example, I would put in, you can put in a partial amount here, such as 0.5. I believe that you cannot just put in 0.5. I think it has to be 0.5. So I'll give you that warning now. And let's say 5,000. You would go in and create the board members pretty much like that. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing real quick and go back to answering questions. Next, I have a question from OVA. Are assisted living facilities formerly customized living service providers also required to do a cost report? Cost reporting services for the disability waivers is included in this reporting. As you can see in the revenue page, there are call outs for those other revenues and allocations for those services. So yes, but only if you were actually doing customized living as a particular service. So if you don't see that particular service and revenue code in the drop downs, chances are you wouldn't have to do cost reporting. We might have flagged you improperly when it comes to automatically kind of figuring out our sample. So if you have concerns that the services that you provide aren't disability waiver services, or you cannot find the particular service that you do, I encourage you to reach out to our email and ask for that specific advice. So it looks like Josh H had a follow-up that I will read. This question is for unique individuals supported. When Matt was talking, he said to only account annual recipients one time. How do you determine what service to count them under? You should report each person under the service that they use. So if you have, let's say, day support services and corporate foster care, just throwing out some examples, and you have one person who receives both of those services, when it comes to reporting your revenue lines, you would, if you only have the one person in your that you're taking care of, you would record them in both of those lines. So one for day support services and one for corporate foster care. And then in the annual unique recipient section, you would say one, if that makes sense, because they are receiving two services, but in the annual unique recipients field, you would only put one, because if you unduplicated what you're seeing there, it's just that one person. So I guess the easy way to think about this when it comes to counting unique individuals on the revenue page, annual unique recipients is unduplicated. Unique recipients receiving services can be duplicated in the individual revenue lines, if that makes sense. And please feel free to ask me clarifying questions if that doesn't. Okay, the final question that I have a response for is from Carol. Do we sum all of our DSP workers and record a total sum, or do we create a line for each employee? So that's kind of what I addressed earlier. In general, I would recommend that you combine as many of your workers into one line as possible. So I'll go back to that particular page and show all of you again. Okay, so you're looking at the admin staff section. I'm going to go to direct care because that's what this one in particular was about. So in this example, we have one direct care worker down here. But if I wanted to have like an entire line represent all of my day staff, I could do that here. Say that they are employees, include in my previous example, I said I had 4 of my day staff, and they each make about 25,000 per year. So 25,000 times 4 is 100,000. And then all of their hours combined, in this case, I'm going to say it's about 8,160 hours. And then I would include all of their overtime together, all of their holiday pay together, PTO, all that business. And I would do the same there. Let's say I had LPN staff for residential or day services. In that case, I would put them as a licensed direct care worker. And if it's the same situation, but let's say the LPNs make 50,000 per year, roughly, or they're paid hourly, I would sum up their total payments and then their total hours worked in a similar way. So if in this example, my LPN staff were each making about 50,000, 50,000, let's say I have 4 of them, then that would come out to be a 200,000 in their payments per year. So that's just one example. If it just makes the most sense to you to split them out, and split them out, by that I mean your staff, that's probably going to most likely be, if you're a smaller provider, it would just make the most sense to do it that way. Larger providers, they're probably going to have full classes of workers that work for them, and for them, it's going to make sense to roll up many of those employees into one line and try to simplify entering in information here as much as possible. But if you're a smaller provider and it makes the most sense to you to report out each employee individually, or maybe, just like a handful of employees together and others separate, that's totally fine. The purpose of this page is to just kind of get a sense of your overall direct care staff. And it's not necessarily to see how many we can kind of lump together or what have you. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen again and see if there are any other questions I can help answer. All right, okay, Jennifer Freeberg asked a question a moment ago that it looks like we haven't answered. If a position was vacant and we were trying to fill it, do we include the amount we budgeted or only what was actually expensed? You would only do what was actually expensed. We are looking at actual costs only. And though, of course, with the workforce shortage, that's obviously a big thing, and it has repercussions elsewhere in your business. And if there are costs that are occurring because of that workforce shortage, I hope that there are plenty of other opportunities to reflect those costs that do occur because you don't have the appropriate number of staff. So if you're relying on overtime for other folks to make up that difference, you would include overtime in their lines. Or if you're perhaps going through a number of staff and you have to train them, we have opportunities to report the training costs that you have, things like that. Okay, so that is all of the questions, and we are ending with like 1 minute to spare. Please, if you have any other questions or concerns, email us at that email address I showed at the beginning. It is dhs.dwrscostreporting@state.mn.us. I'll put it up actually one more time. got to share my screen again. Apologies, everyone. Not quite as fast with being a host as I thought I would be. And so there you are. That is our email address again. I just would like to say thank you for attending this demonstration of the system. Again, reach out to us if you have any questions or concerns for your organization. This is kind of our crunch period, this final month of August, since the cost reports are due at the end of the month. So we will send you responses as soon as we can. Just know that, if we do get kind of slammed with emails, it might just take us a couple of business days, but we will absolutely get to your questions as quickly as possible. And with that, I'm going to stop the presentation and end it.
Dylan, is there one thing I could say too?
Sure, Matt, go
thanks,
ahead.
everyone. This is Matt again, and thanks, Dylan, for bringing up the combining revenue streams onto one line. I will say too, one of the more common issues, if you want to call it that we've seen thus far from providers reaching out to the email, in terms of logging in. So when you, as a provider, your authorized agent gets that initial email that has their username and temporary password, we recommend using the copy and paste method. Due to some, characters looking the same, like the number 0 and the letter O, for example, those errors aren't uncommon if you just try to type it out. So we recommend the copying and pasting in there, and then just making sure there isn't like an extra space, for example, at the end of your username too, because that will throw everything off. But again, if you experience any issues accessing your report, please, feel free to email us at that email address Dylan mentioned.
All right, thank you, everyone. We got one final question about if this demonstration was being recorded and if it can be accessed later. The answer to that is yes, it will be posted to the GHS training website shortly. We also have older versions of this demo already available, including, I think they're available on the DWRS cost reporting website itself. So again, if you Google that website and go there, you should be able to find that presentation. Just word of caution that they might talk about authorized agents and provider users more in depth than we did. And that's just because we've improved the functionality since then, and that wouldn't apply to you. Yeah, so thank you all again, and thank you to my colleagues for helping me manage this. All right, take care, everyone.